friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is episode 31. It is April 1st, 2019. I am currently in Bristol, England with Cuckoo Kangaroo and Mega Ran. We are shooting a music video today for a song I wrote about Stonehenge with these guys. And our friend Marianne Harris is doing the music video. She did the Ballad of Hans Moleman video. She's awesome. And so that's what's up today. You still got a chance to see us if you haven't caught us yet. We are in Birmingham on the 2nd, Leicester on the 3rd, Leeds on the 5th, Stockport, which is Manchester, on the 6th, Newcastle on the 7th, Glasgow, Scotland on the 9th, Huddersfield on the 10th, Nottingham on the 11th, and then we finish in London on the 13th. Then we go to America, play a different lineup. It's Front a Lot, Megaran, Schaefer, the Dark Lord, and me. We start April 30th in Fargo, May 1st in Minneapolis, May 2nd in Milwaukee, May 3rd in Chicago, May 4th in Pontiac, Michigan, which is near Detroit, May 5th in Lakewood, Ohio, which is Cleveland, May 7th in Rochester, May 8th Columbus, May 9th Pittsburgh, May 10th Nashville, Tennessee, May 11th Birmingham, Alabama, May 12th Charlotte, North Carolina, May 13th Atlanta, May 14th, Gainesville, Florida. May 15th, West Palm Beach, Florida, which is kind of near Miami. Then May 16th, we play Orlando, Florida. Then June 8th, I'm doing a full band reunion show with my original bandmates in Boston at the Brighton Music Hall with Big D and the Kids Table. So before we get into today's episode, I wanted to shout out Patreon supporters. Shout out to our new supporters, Nicholas, Nathan, and Matthew. And shout out to our OG supporters, Alex, Eli, and Dylan. So, even though today's April Fool's, this is a very serious episode. And for those of you who've been following the podcast and listening to me on my Patreon jams and reading my Patreon essays, I just finished Infinite Jest and interviewed Greg Carlisle, who I've talked about that interview a lot. That's coming up. And the end of Infinite Jest, it's actually the beginning of the book where Hal Incandenza is given this gift from his father posthumously to get him to try to have feelings, to feel his voice and feel what he's feeling. But in feeling feelings, he loses his voice. So it's kind of ironic that, I'm going to spoil the plot a little bit, but that he comes out of his shell, but then can't communicate. And it's made me think a lot about a gift a friend gave me who passed away, my friend Patrick, who I wrote 23 about, who a lot of you have probably heard or seen the video of or seen me play live. And these days, I've been a little bit sad. I had a very close family member take her life last year. And I was on tour and it was just really hard, like dealing with that. And we're going to have her memorial service when I get back to California. But death and depression and all this stuff is such a bummer, to put it lightly. And it's even worse for the people who suffer it, because sometimes we can't really know exactly what they're going through. And today's episode is with Lisette Rimer, the mother of my friend Patrick Wood, who wrote a book called Parade Rest about what it's been like having a child take his life. And I cannot imagine the pain of raising a kid and having him removed from your life. I lost a friend, but she lost a son, a part of her. So I've just been, kind of feeling my feelings more. And this podcast was super emotional to do. I went to Pat's house where I talked about this in the song when I went to visit them. And right when he passed, I'd never been to his house, but I knew him well. And I knew, I was familiar with stories of his family, and to see everything in a light like that was really sad. But this time, going back 13 years later, it was a little easier. And it kind of gave me some perspective on the pain I've been feeling about losing my aunt who recently took her life. So being able to talk about this stuff and go deep about the feelings and the hows and the whys is therapeutic. It's exhausting. And this podcast, you might want a box of Kleenex next to you when you listen to it, but it was really great to see Pat's mom and connect with her as a friend, as two adults trying to process this stuff. And she read from her book and we told stories, and it was just very visceral and real. But it was also, there was some optimism in that, we heal a little bit. It always hurts but we heal. I tell a story of a dream I had where I saw Pat and he told me to let go and keep laughing. And so, yeah, oh man, it's even emotional introducing this. I try to keep, this podcast is happy and fun, but this is a very serious episode. So we're going to end with the 23 remix, which I did in 2011 with Weird Science. And it's about like the healing of that comes with music. And of course, I'm playing this song in the UK this tour. So, that's like, it's just been, it all comes back, but there's a light through the sadness. So Lisette, thank you for being on the show. Thank you for inviting me to your house, for making me lunch, for always being, a good sounding board and having an open heart and all the work you do to help keep your son's memory alive. And I hope that the lesson comes from this, to have an open heart, to be there for our friends, to know there's certain things we can't control, but look for the signs, if people are suffering, and just know that, you always have someone to call, even when it feels like you can't escape like the darkest hole you've ever been in. Sometimes your brain, the point we kind of get to, sometimes your brain lies to you. Sometimes what makes suicide and depression so confusing is that like you have an organ that is mentally ill, like, that is ill, like having diabetes, but the thing is it's like having your body tell you don't need insulin, that you're fine, when meanwhile you're like going into diabetic shock. It's similar. So obviously I'm not a trained professional and I can only talk about these things peripherally, but I think the subjective story here is one of optimism and hope. And Lisette and her family are such strong, amazing people, the way they persevered and kept Pat's memory alive. And I hope we can all keep his memory alive by finding the good in this. So yeah, Pat will always be 23 to me because that was the last age I knew him as. And that was the age he was when he took his life. And in a way, that there's something beautiful about the memories I have of him. They'll always be there. So, all right, well, let's get into the interview, and I'll post more about Lisette's book when it comes out. She's doing a final editing and stuff, but she talks about the writing process and how that's been. And so this is my interview with Lisette Rimer. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a special episode of the MC Lars podcast. I'm here with Lisette Rimer, the mother of my late friend, Patrick Wood. And Lisette, you said maybe you'd want to start off the episode reading something.
Oh, great. Okay.
Is that cool?
Yes. This is a section from my book about Pat, which takes place when we came to see you performing at Amoeba Records in San Francisco. And Pat's twin sister, Libby, and her partner, Lindsay, and I drove up from Santa Cruz, where Libby and Lindsay were living at the time. And so that's the background. We drove to San Francisco to see Pat's Stanford roommate, Andrew, perform his laptop rap. We drove past the golden vastness of coastal Route 1, the treeless hills, the sparkling water on beaches and boulders, windsurfers mingled sails with sky, fields of yellow mustard mounded into hills to the east. We wormed through commuter traffic in Daly City and then took the fastest streets to save time, Portola to Market to 17th Street in the Castro, with rainbow flags flying, and then into the Haight. Rattles drowned out conversations in Lindsay's ancient Volvo. Its transmission clunked from first to second gear. A downshift and smaller clunk nursed it up San Francisco hills. We leveled out on Haight Street and back and forth into a parallel spot close to Amoeba Music. Its neon bowling alley marquee advertised records, posters, videos. A green and blue mural with stars and balls topped the storefront. The inside was divided by signs for CDs and LPs. Posters covered the walls. A non-smiling bouncer gestured at my backpack. Libby unhooked it from my shoulders and gave it to him. She held my hand as we walked past aisles of new and used vinyl records, which spread out from a nave of creaky floorboards. Drums and bass from the back of the building grew louder. Libby guided me to a gathering of Andrew's fans. She and Lindsay blended with their dark skinny jeans, Converse All-Stars, and worn T-shirts. The crowd sang, jumped, and waved with Andrew's rhythms. Beats pounded, heads bobbed, feet tapped. Andrew bounced, hand up, hand down, words, words, words. Video backed up audible snatches. The Raven in nerd rap, Moby Dick with children in fish costumes on the screen behind Andrew. The music quieted. This next song is dedicated to my friend Pat Wood. Pat suffered from depression and took his own life, and I really miss him. I want everybody to understand depression better, for Pat. Photos of Pat in 4th, 6th, and 8th grade came up on the screen, followed by pictures at Stanford with Andrew. Then a sharp tone beat. Down the hall, there's a kid that I know. He's kind of quirky, so I say hello. He's so sarcastic, but he's always right, working on those problem sets late into the night. Mad magazines sit piled by his bed, a million brilliant thoughts going all through his head. We bike to class in the autumn rain. He tells me that he's fine, but I know he's in pain. Pat, I miss you, dude. It's so hard to say goodbye. In Europe last winter, you were tired of the lie. Monoxide in the bathroom, but the door was locked. We were always there for you. You could have called and talked. I felt guilty and alone and so sick when I discovered you did it in Berlin. You had just talked to your mother. I guess it was too much. Depression, disillusion, maybe suicide's an answer, but it wasn't the solution. And I wish that you hadn't done it, could have won it, and moved on from it. The hipster crowd was silent. Some swayed slowly. I stood behind them, out of place, with my gray hair and preppy khakis. Andrew, known as MC Lars, introduced me as Pat's mom, and the crowd turned toward me as if to meet what was left of Pat's life. When the volume died down, Andrew signed posters of his album, This Gigantic Robot Kills, with Pat's song, 23. Keep Pat Wood's memory alive, he scrawled over cartoon figures of a robot with a chainsaw. Be happy and be yourself. Listen to your friends with an open heart. Your friend, MC Lars. Friends from Stanford told Pat stories to Libby. Your brother was so quiet, one of them remembered. And then he would come out with something hilarious. He would wait for a pause in the conversation, and then he would say something out of the blue like, so, speaking of penises, and then the jokes would pile on from there. Andrew's backup singer said he was so smart, but you would never know it by talking to him. He was just one of us. Pat's friends were an unlikely support group of hipsters and rappers 1/3 my age. They were the children teaching the mother about the son.
Wow, that's a really beautiful piece. Remember you emailed that to me because you wanted to use the lyrics for the for your book, and of course, I was honored. It's really touching to hear you read those lines. I mean, especially the part in the verse about when he called you. You know, yeah. It's the last time I was here at your house was right after it happened, and I remember it's coming back now so many years later. It's not as sad because we're here to celebrate your son, and I'm going to England for the 10-year anniversary of that album.
Yeah.
And it's been a real keeping in touch with you over the years it's been really helpful for me, and I hope it's been helpful for you.
Yeah, oh, definitely, because Pat killed himself in Berlin, so I was reliant on a lot of his friends so that I could find out what he was like closer to the time that he did it. The last time I saw him was the Christmas of 2005, which was about a month before he killed himself. And so I was like a detective looking for information. And so I emailed everybody. I was desperate, really, for information about what was going on with him. I mean, I knew he was sad, but I really had no clue how depression worked, how somebody so brilliant could give all that up and not want to be around anymore. And so I think that's why I wrote the book, because I just couldn't let it go. I just couldn't get it. So at first I sort of attacked it through family history. Where did this come from? Well, my mother died of alcoholism, and I thought, well, it was just an accident. She didn't really want to die. Every time she had been drinking before when I was younger, she would always come back, and she would be great, and she was a great parent. And then periodically she would just kind of disappear and really be in a coma with alcohol. I never really got that up and down mood that was going on with her. I really just never got it. And so when she died, I had already had Colin, and I was thinking about life. I really wasn't able at that point to concentrate too much on death. When Pat died, okay, I got to figure this out. This is just unbelievable that when he died, I knew hit the background. I knew this child came from a fairly normal upbringing. There was absolutely no reason in my mind, no logical reason that someone with his ability, with the love I thought I gave him, a pretty strong family, established enough to give him a Stanford education. I just didn't get it. It just smacked me in the face with a 2x4. That's what it did.
And it's like, what I've learned recently is you can never really know how depression feels, right? And it's like, for me, it's been a process of knowing that sometimes you do all you can. And if someone, I just wish he had called me or something, like in those final hours. And that vulnerability is what made him so special and brilliant and unique. And that he'd gone off his meds, right? And that was a decision he made that wasn't anyone's fault. It was just a horrible circumstance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he, I guess I always loved his stories about Germany because he was home there.
Yeah.
I remember his emails about there and how much fun he had in finding love and his career opportunities. And he'd done his master's, right? Or he was in the process?
Well, he had been admitted to the computer science master's program. So he was in something called coterm, where you're sort of working on your master's and you're finishing your undergrad degree at the same time. And but he basically put that on hold so that he could stay in Berlin longer. And I encouraged him to do it because I thought maybe it's the pressure from school. Maybe he just, I didn't want him to think that I was, pushing for him to achieve and constantly do well and get degrees and things like that. I just wanted him to be free. I wanted him to be happy. And he had a good friend over there. And honestly, he loved the club scene. I mean,
right.
He was very, very popular there. So when I would make these periodic trips to Berlin, I would meet his friends, beautiful young men who wanted to be with him. So yes, there was a boy who rejected Pat, but at the same time, Pat was doing a lot of the rejecting. And so nothing added up to why he did this. It had to be something besides. Yes, he was exploring his sexuality. But a lot of gay men explore their sexuality. And I just didn't understand what a hurdle that was. I think the only thing that haunts me still is what Libby has pointed out to me, because both Patrick and Libby are gay. They're twins. And it was Libby who really tried to explain to me how difficult that is to be gay in this world, whether you're in this country or Germany, or you have tremendous fear of rejection, because each social situation you're feeling it out. You're seeing people differently. I mean, what's the percentage of gay people in the population? I think the estimate is 5 to 10%. I would certainly go higher now that people are being more upfront about their sexuality. So that means 90% at the very least are people that are going to reject you if you approach them. It must be incredibly difficult terrain to navigate. I never really got this because he had prepared himself in every way possible. But as Libby explained, it's a lot harder than I thought it was. It's a lot harder. And even Pat's friend, Ryan Wirtz, who really saved me after Pat died, because Ryan and Patrick were great friends, and Ryan knew Patrick probably better than anyone, including me at the time that Pat died, said that, you think you're going to go to Stanford. Stanford's going to be a great place. It's on the West Coast. It's liberal. It's nerdy. It's funny.
Yeah.
And it's not. It's not that easy, because again, most of the people there are straight.
That's interesting. And it's there's always this metaphor I remember people talking about. Everyone was like a duck there. We're floating on the water, but underneath we're paddling like crazy to keep up, because everyone in your class is like 1600 SAT, got into all these other great schools, and it's your light, I found, for me, was my release was music, but my light it didn't feel like it shined as brightly, compared to high school. And I remember with Pat, like, it slowly, I didn't find out he was gay until probably sophomore year, or because I never knew about it. I remember there was this event called Full Moon on the Quad, where the freshmen would go kiss the seniors and on the full moon. And he and I both thought it was like weird. So we held back outside of the circle because it felt weird to be in this like an institutionalized party, bacchanalian thing. And, and that was like, we were both shy, but also it was like to be forced with this heteronormative, like experience, it's kind of like not so fun, like this idea that you're forced to be happy in a certain way. And Pat was something I loved about your son and always will. He did things his own way. He didn't subscribe to the normal way of doing things. And a lot of college, I guess, is about conformity, even in a non-conformist elite university. But I remember like how hard he worked, and he kind of like threw himself into his assignments, but then he'd make time to have fun and hang out. And
that's good.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I'm afraid after reading his psychiatrist notes that, and also talking to him, is that he worked too hard. And he would stay up all night, for example, making his math homework look like it was out of a textbook. So in other words, he would download the fonts that he needed, all the math symbols, and he would type his math homework. I don't know if you've ever tried to type math, but
wow,
it's really hard.
Yeah.
And so he would stay up all night doing that. And I thought, I don't understand. He said, it's because I don't know when to stop. I don't know how to stop. And so when I read his psychiatrist's notes, that was a pattern. He just didn't. I mean, I don't want to use the word perfect because I don't want everybody to say, oh, well, that's why. He couldn't be perfect. So I don't think it was that so much as I think he suffered from a disease, and I just did not understand what the disease was until I read enough about it that I was finally satisfied with a very layperson understanding of it. But it also helped me understand that there's a stigma attached to it, because I don't think everybody understands that it's a disease, that it's a physical disease. So, as we were talking about earlier, if there's anything that I've come away with that I would like other people to know, it's that I have learned that depression is a disease of the brain. And I've learned that the brain is an organ, just like any other part of your body. And it is subject to flaws. And it took me a long time to discover that, because most of the literature on depression is about how people think. And what I came to believe is that the very organ which is doing the thinking is defective. And it tells people to either jump off the Golden Gate Bridge or to eliminate all the other options, or to concentrate on this one tunnel vision of pain. And it shuts down all the other processes. And when I say it, I mean it in the real sense of the word. And I finally came across a book that explained it in layman's terms as best as possible. And that was a book called Against Depression by Peter Kramer, because he described all of the research that shows what depression really looks like. Because nothing else made sense. You are in position to be the most amazing person I've ever known. And you gave it up. Because what is it that makes you focus on that being the only option? And I think it's a physical process. It's a pathology that I don't think a lot of people understand. I think, like me, they maybe thought, oh, well, his girlfriend jilted him, or he felt pressure in the army, and he couldn't say anything about it, or something like that. It's like, no, this is like a tumor in your brain that's killing you, and you don't have any OxyContin for it.
Or like, that's a really good example. Or like someone who's diabetic who needs insulin, and it's like a physical organ that's not acting properly. And like you said so well, if it's your mind, then you're unable to see that, to diagnose yourself.
Yeah, right.
And that's like the real thing that's so sad about suicide, is you can't undo it. And I know that if we had the chance to be there with him, or if we would have stopped him.
Yeah, you would have.
And that's like, and I know he wouldn't make that decision again.
There was an interesting thing on one of our favorite organizations, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, who you turn to. We both turn to that organization separately.
Yeah.
You for the beautiful song 23, which I just read, and me out of desperation for what is this? Why? And I went back to that site again in preparation for today, just to see what the latest is. I mean, to me, there's got to be something that's going to come along and be a cure. And I know that's wishful, but I mean, the rates of suicide are just increasing. It's a scourge. It's a scourge everywhere. I mean, it's responsible for 9/11. It's responsible for the school shooting and Sandy Hook. I mean, Virginia Tech. I mean, that young man killed 32 people and then killed himself. And I remember watching the news after that Virginia Tech shooting. I think that was in, 2008, something like that.
Yeah.
Not long after Pat died in 2006. Watching that and thinking, all right, people, let's see you try to come up with an answer. Let's see. And it's like everybody's floundering. They're all struggling to understand what this is. So anyway, I went back to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And one of the lead doctors was saying, the urge to kill yourself is temporary. It will pass if you can just find a way to distract yourself. In Pat's case, his psychiatrist very wisely said, here's a plan for safety for you. Call for help. If you just can hang on while your mind is closing itself down and going farther and farther in. And the doctor on the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention said, you're fighting your mind. That's what you're doing. Mm. And she made that separation between your actions and what your mind is telling you to do, whether it's voices or just narrowing like that. And I thought, this is good to understand intellectually, but you only have one mind. Right. What's the other mind that you're going to use to fight it with? There isn't any. You got one.
Yeah, and that's, I guess, the being able to reach the right professionals and the mind, having faith that it's a weird thing to be able to have faith that, oh, I'm seeing the world wrong. These people are right.
Right.
When Pat was such a brilliant, capable, amazing person that he had this idea, well, maybe I'm smarter than them, or maybe I see things more clearly than them. I mean, it seems also that being 23 is freaking hard too. Even when you're not depressed or dealing with, finding your soulmate and stuff like that, living in another country, starting a new career, and having gotten accepted into an amazing master's program, 23. So it's something I still am sad about, but I remember I went to the reunion in 2015 and my wife was my then fiance or girlfriend was there and I talked about him. I spoke in front of the class, people who had done interesting things. Then we drove back up. I was living in Marin County and I remember she was asleep and I remember crying, going over the Golden Gate Bridge, wishing that he had been there. And it was seeing all of our old friends and remembering him. I was like, God, I remember our trips to get food at night and sitting on, I talked about El Camino when he told me his secret and passing all these places and being like, God, I really wish he'd been there. And for me personally, it was dealing with anger that why couldn't you come back to me as a friend and call me or email me that it was so hard? I remember I'd seen him on campus when he was studying and he told me he'd been in the hospital that summer of 2005.
Right.
And I didn't, he joked there was this song called Happy Pills by this guy, Aesop Rock. And he'd be like, oh, I take my happy pills too. Ha ha ha. And I was like, and he the way he talked about it was with humor, but then I knew it was serious, but I always was surprised by that too.
That's the thing that always threw me is that he was in the hospital. I regret horribly not going out there at the time. But on the phone, he sounded good.
Yeah.
And he had made the mistake of looking at a website of a man that he really wanted to be with. He called it, wishing from afar, and the man just didn't respond. And Pat made the mistake of going to his website one more time. It was a man that he had met in Munich, and they had really just had one dinner together, and Pat just started obsessing about him, frankly. So he told me on the phone, I just went to this website, and I couldn't stop thinking about him, and I was going to go to the student union, and I was going to get aspirin, and I was going to overdose on aspirin. And then I went to the infirmary on campus instead, and they checked him into the hospital.
This was at Stanford,
And
right?
this was at Stanford. That was this, late winter, I think, in February of 2005. And so he called me from the hospital. We had a great conversation. He said he had thoughts of suicide. And I'm thinking in my head, nothing. And I said, Pat, I don't know what to say. And he said, okay, but I'm all right now. And so I said, all right, who doesn't think of suicide,
Sure, yeah.
Who doesn't say they're going to throw themselves off a cliff, to be melodramatic?
Or wouldn't it like you think, oh, here's a final way to deal with this. I'll just kill myself. Think of that fleetingly, even if you're not serious
That's
about
how I'm going to get out of this situation.
Right.
And I'm thinking he's where he wants to be. He is in the best place. I mean, I let him basically make all the decisions of his life because they were all perfect decisions. They were all wonderful decisions.
He was an adult.
He was an adult.
Yeah.
He was an adult.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Wirtz wrote me. Ryan worked he worked Pat's good friend in Berlin and also a Stanford graduate. Worked for Ambassador Timken, who was the ambassador to Germany. And he took Pat to a party at the ambassador's mansion. I mean, they had a great time.
That's fun.
They really had a great time. And Ryan wrote me after Pat died. He was old enough to have top secret clearance. He was old enough to know state secrets.
Yeah.
That is how society felt. How society thinks you are what you were able to handle when you're 23 years old. And I guess I was a victim of that. I think one thing I liked about learning about depression is that Peter Kramer, in his book Against Depression, said that when you're dealing with a depressed patient, you are basically dealing with a body double. You're dealing with like an occupying government, and you really don't know who you're talking to. Are you talking to Pat, or are you talking to who Pat thinks you want to hear? Are you talking to somebody who wants to kill themselves, or are you talking to someone who thinks they're fine? So, in a way, I think Pat was deceiving us, fooling us, because I think in a way he had made up his mind. And sadly, I've learned once you see that path, everything else is shut out. And so people kindly wrote me stories of suicides that could not be prevented, no matter if you or I or anybody had been there. That you're with a suicidal person, you turn your back for 1 minute, and that person is out the window. So it's just the biggest conundrum, the biggest puzzle, the biggest scourge I see of mankind, because I think there's a bit of a blurry line between suicides and then murder-suicide. What's the difference between someone who kills 50 plus people in Las Vegas and then shoots himself? What is the difference? Is it something that we can see in their brains, like we can see in a depressed brain?
Yeah, and feeling, well, in that case, it's like the anger, taking that anger out on a world that rejected them.
Yeah.
And Pat was a kind person, and such a loving person. And
Yeah.
you told me a story about how he drew straws to get the bigger room, and he gave it to his sister, like kind stuff like that. I remember he'd always be so supportive of my music. Like, I have all my recording equipment there, and that quote of him in 23 was, I was doing demo stuff, and he'd be up all night doing his problem sets, and I'd be doing music and like stuff like that, where he was just such a great friend. I've never had a friend like him again, and I know I never will. And I liked it, being able to honor his friendship by talking about him and performing that song. I've had such a response where people like say, I thought about hurting myself, and knowing how it would affect the people I love, and how, like, seeing how hard it was for the people Pat loved, is what kind of made me have second thoughts. And I think that's like one positive thing.
Oh my God! Thank God they were reachable.
Yeah,
really. I even had kids come up to me in school. I was teaching in middle school when Pat died, and I went back to school a couple months after he died, not knowing if it was the right move or not, because, believe me, I was not the same person. And I walked into my old class, and they were crying. They were crying for me. And then kids would come up to me and talk to me about how they just realized they were gay, and how they knew they were gay. And all this because they knew what had happened to Patrick, and they knew who he was. I mean, it surprised me how much they knew about him. And so, yeah, I started a safe space program at my school. I spoke to the school about how it's, you don't understand how you are offending someone when you say that's so gay.
Yeah.
And I guess just, sadly that, when Pat died, that whole movement was starting, the gay ally movement. I mean, he'd come out to me before he died, and I had decided a long time ago, even before he came out, that whenever he did, if he did, what was I going to do? Well, I was going to love him, and nothing was going to change. So when he did come out to me, he said, "I'm sorry, no grandchildren." And I said, "I don't care about that. I just want you to be happy.
Oh,
If you're okay with it, I'm okay with it."
that's beautiful.
Thank gosh I got a chance to say that.
When did he come out to you?
Oh gosh. It was probably right around the time he was in the hospital.
Wow.
And so I guess about a year before he died. But, and it was really great because then it opened up all kinds of conversations about the goofy things he had done. Like, he was so hilarious.
Yeah.
He told me about a time when he was at a club in Berlin. And apparently the clubs in Berlin can be, shall we say, a little risque. Which is great, because maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe you need to just act out,
Sure.
when you're discovering who you are. And then you need to go through it and, do goofy things. And then
Yeah.
you come out and it's like, okay,
Right.
I know where the center is, maybe a little bit more.
Yeah.
So he met somebody at a club in Berlin, which his friends took me to, which was another whole story. But anyway, and he was waiting for him in the back room of this club, thinking, is this a good idea or not a good idea? And then impetuously he decided it was not a good idea, and he slipped out the back door and disappeared into the night.
Uh-huh.
And I thought, oh, thank God, because there were other times when he thought it was a good idea.
Mm.
And to him, it was a good idea because he needed to sort of break through this barrier
Right.
of discovering who he was. And I was just so touched that, once he came out, we could talk about anything.
It's awesome.
Anything. The time he had an affair, the time he broke up with the boy, the time the boy didn't want him. All the back and forth that you go through. And after he died, I kept asking my therapist, so many people wanted him.
Yeah. He's a very handsome guy, very in shape, beautiful man.
And yet, again, I go back to Peter Kramer in his book Against Depression, who gave me the clearest explanation of depression that I ever read, which was, and maybe I was just in the right time and place to receive it, but it was that depressed people do not recover from disappointment. Mm. Like when we face a setback, we have something good that we did that we can counteract that terrible feeling with. Okay, but remember, you still did this, something good. You're going to be okay. Well, depressed people can't do that. Their disappointments have no limit. And I think Pat was one of those people.
And it's like his intellect had no limit either. He was a man who lived without boundaries, really. And that's what made him like such a beautiful and friendship. He'd do anything for his friends or, stay up all night for a math problem. Like those are the brilliant people are the people who are like in another world.
Yeah.
And it's been, getting to know his friends. And I don't know if I told you this, our friend Mike, we went to the Stanford campus and sat on his bench.
Oh, you
years
did?
ago, because there's that bench dedicated to him in the garden there.
Oh, for goodness sakes. I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, I think it went in 2010 or 11. So we sat in his bench. It's like his place he'd like to sit.
Is this Mike Love?
Yeah, Mike Love.
Yeah.
So we went there because Mike was at the Max Planck School getting his PhD in Berlin. So I used to, when I tour England, I'd go see Mike and we'd remember Pat and go to places he went. And, what was your last conversation like with him? And did you ever feel like it was going to be your last conversation or?
Of course, it's all tainted. At the time, I was trying to support him, but I could hear his voice was very tight, and he couldn't, it's almost like he wasn't breathing normally. And that's a very regretful memory for me because it was not long after New Year's, and I knew he wanted to reconnect with a young man that he had met in one of the clubs. He was a DJ in one of the clubs in Berlin. And the summer before, in 2005, right after Pat graduated, he had met this young man in a club, and at first he didn't want to be with him. Pat and I had many conversations about, I don't know, what do you think? Should I go with him? Should I not go with him? And I said, well, okay, let's look at the pros and we went all back and forth.
And by the way, it's kind of touching my heart to know that both people who have dated men could relate on that. That's kind
I
of
didn't
cool.
see any difference,
Yeah,
really.
that's
It's
awesome.
like you're looking for the same things, you know?
Right.
It's, to me,
Yeah.
it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
I just,
That's very beautiful.
yeah, it was, I don't know. I just always felt that way about Patrick and Libby. I was worried that, of course, it was a harder road. And I wrote him that in an email. It's a tougher road. But then I began to learn this is not a choice. You know, you, as Libby once said to me, Mom, why would I choose this? You know what I mean? It's just so hard.
Right.
But anyway, the last conversation was, I'm not proud of it all, but I asked him how things went on New Year's Eve, if he had been able to reconnect. And boy, his voice just went way tighter, way strained. And I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said something like, you can do it, Pat. You can do it. We'd had conversations, and I don't remember if what I said was in that exact conversation, but I just said I was so sorry, and I just hoped for him. I just hoped for him. I can't remember. I mean, God, I wish I had said so many other better things like, do you need help? That's what I should have said. And then I should have gotten on a plane and I should have gone over there.
But he didn't. I mean, I'm sure he didn't hint at all that he was thinking
He did
about
not.
hurting himself.
And this is a good
that's
point.
not your fault.
It's a good, but you're the parent.
Yeah.
So you're feeling like you got to go a little farther than halfway sometimes, And I remember he said, I've been sick. I've missed a couple of weeks of work. And I said, oh my gosh, Pat, I'm so sorry. Are you sick? Do you have a cold?
Right.
And I think if he had said, I'm sick, I would have, but he didn't. He said,
could have had
no,
the flu.
no, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I'm fine. And I thought, okay, I guess I don't have to do anything more. I mean, we had talked in the previous fall, 2005, that, I said, what about, he said, maybe I should go back to Stanford and see my doctor. I said, wow, all the way back to Stanford? Why don't you just get a doctor in Berlin? I said, is it a language problem? And he said, no, because by then he was very fluent. It took him a while. Initially, he would joke that it took him about 10 minutes to put a sentence together in German. But anyway, because, I don't know, everything's all turned around.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Mike Love would be able to explain it because he's very fluent too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about a lot of the issues that Pat was having. And I thought when you get them out there and you look at them, they're not inside where they're destroying you, They're outside. Somebody is seeing it the way you're seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
But depression goes beyond that. Depression is not logical. It's an emotion. It does not react to rationale. And that's the way I've always tried to use rationale to get my way out of certain situations. And I thought, here is the smartest person I know. Like you say, perfect SATs, scholarship to Stanford, on and on and on. Played piano magnificently.
We didn't even talk about that. Yeah.
We haven't, but
Brilliant musician.
the link that I sent you to his concerto, his Saint-Saëns concerto, is just over the top. I mean, was he a senior? Maybe even a junior in high school when he played that. And I had it remastered.
Yeah.
So that it would sound more like an orchestra rather than just Pat, and then he had a friend on a synthesizer. Anyway, if you get a chance, I highly recommend it. But how could anybody who is so accomplished not understand that you have a better chance if you're alive? than you do when you're dead.
Right.
But I guess he didn't want any more chances.
And that's what you and I sitting here like trying to put these pieces together. We
Yeah.
can speculate on that, and that's the whole tragedy of this. And it's been, the healing has been. I think one thing we can get from this is it hurts, but it doesn't hurt like it did the day I found out. It hurts though in a different way.
Yeah.
Like having an ankle that always kind of is numb when you twist your ankle.
Yeah.
Lisette, what was it like the day you got that call, and like how did you get through like that week when you found out?
Well, it's torture. I just think it's not news that you can take in at all. And so my first reaction was, he can't be.
Right.
He's got to be breathing. And I'm going to go over there and I'm going to keep him breathing. And so we did. We went to Berlin right away. And met his really good friends, Ryan Wirtz and Steve Price, the people at the Stanford Center in Berlin, which I highly recommend visiting. Another Pat Shrine. They very kindly got rushed approval from German authorities to put a bench and an apple tree on the property of the Stanford Center in Berlin for Pat. And now because Ryan Wirtz has also passed away just this last December at 38 years old, there will be another apple tree out there too. So it's very appropriate. As Karen Kramer, the director of the Stanford Center, wrote me, the two apple trees will be able to cross-pollinate and make more apples, which is really what Pat and Ryan had. They had that cross-pollination. And so the night that Pat killed himself, Steve called him up to ask him for dinner. That day, Ryan was texting him. When he was in the process of killing himself, there were text messages coming in on his phone, which he left outside the bathroom where he died on purpose so that he couldn't hear them, I'm sure. He was reading The Sorrows of Young Werther, and he had the book face down on the coffee table in his apartment, open to the page where Werther steps behind the curtain. And why doesn't one go there, Goethe says? It's because we don't know what's behind it. And so it's the moment when Werther decides to kill himself. And I think Pat saw so many similarities between himself and Werther in that book that he, I'm assuming, felt that probably Werther was the only one who understood him at that point in his life, that he could not handle disappointment. And yet, when I started reading about how Goethe wrote that book, he wrote it in basically 6 weeks in, I think, 1774. I mean, it was a huge sensation in Germany. He was basically a rock star of his day. And yet, when people started killing themselves over reading that book, dressing like Werther, and there was a story of somebody who was found in a river in Germany with that book in their pocket. It was banned in Leipzig. And Pat told me all this.
Wow.
He knew all this. He knew that it was a dangerous book. He knew that it was hugely popular, that it had a very sad effect on people. But at the time, that was the only thing that was feeding him, I think. And yet, when I looked into why Goethe wrote it, he pleaded with people not to turn his poetry into reality.
Wow.
He did not want people to take that story, which he wrote mainly in reaction to a friend of his committing suicide and another love triangle, that another rejection that he had faced, but certainly not for people to take that to heart and do it themselves.
So in a way, yeah, Pat knew it was dangerous to, I don't know, there's
Yeah.
some danger there, but some,
Yeah.
like that's another confluence of unfortunate things.
Yeah.
But things that no one could have predicted or had any influence on.
Right.
When you got to Berlin, like in a different time zone and having to deal with all the logistics, like I'm sure it took a while to really feel the loss, right? But like, when do you think you first started to accept that this had happened?
I guess it just comes and goes. It's
Yeah.
not steady. It's off and on. It's just like somebody smacked you in the face with a 2x4. It's just like that moment you have after you've just gone through some really big violent action, and you feel dented. I guess torture is the best word I can describe, and yet guilt is right there behind it. Guilt about how you read this situation completely wrong. You thought this person had so much foundation, had so many resources. I mean, Ryan and Steve gave him names of therapists because Pat told them that he was going to kill himself. And they thought they had talked him out of it. So they were much closer to the situation than I was. Patrick told them much more than he told me. But my reaction was, it's just disbelief.
Right.
It was just complete disbelief. And honestly, if he walked in the room right now, I would just be glad that he spent the last 13 years somewhere.
Right.
I wouldn't even care that he, faked his death or whatever scenario I came up with in my mind. It's just like, I don't care. You're happy, you're alive.
Yeah.
That's all I care about, So there's this bizarre part of my mind that hopes for that, because I still can't really accept it. So because I couldn't accept it, I tried writing about it, and then I had all kinds of bits and pieces about what I went through, and then I tried to put them together. And so that's what I'm finishing up now.
So you finished this book, right? And it's called Parade Rest.
Right. And parade rest, I should explain, is it's a military term, and it kind of ties in with my grandparents. My grandfather was an Army officer for 30 years, and then when he retired, they lived in Wilton, Connecticut, and they named their small farm in Wilton, Connecticut, Parade Rest. They had a doormat called Parade Rest. So the whole history about Patrick started long before Patrick. It started with my mother's suicide, and then went back to her parents, and on and on and on. It went back so many generations that I began to put Patrick's death in perspective. And so I thought, what is this? Why this backward push to go back all these generations when really it's it's this one death that I'm consumed with. And the realization came to me that I'm getting perspective on Pat's death. I'm putting it in a long line, in a long parade of life and death. And so the name came to me because it's a military term. It means that a military parade can stand and be in a position that's not quite at attention. It's a little more relaxed than being at attention. It's kind of between attention and at ease. And when your feet come apart and you're at some kind of rest. And I began to realize that it was just a metaphor. It was a metaphor for the long parade of generations I was looking at, and how when my grandfather retired, it was a rest from the parade that he had lived in the military. And that's what, and Pat became a part of that. He just became a part of that parade.
Yeah.
And his parade rested.
Yeah, it did. And I guess one thing is he would have hopefully stopped having that pain, but he was not in pain, anymore. And he rested. He made the choice to rest.
Yeah, right.
And then that's, that's still hard to come to grips with.
Yeah, I thought, okay, was he in pain? What was he not in pain? What was he feeling in the moments before he died? And one thing my therapist helped me understand is that if it's any help to you, the people who kill themselves the way he did, which was through carbon monoxide poisoning. Carbon monoxide robs you of oxygen. And the way Pat did it was to burn charcoal in basically an airtight bathroom. And she said, if it's any help to you at all, Pat was so determined on this plan because that kind of suicide takes a lot of planning.
Right.
You've got to find charcoal in Berlin in the wintertime. That's not available. You have to order it online, which is exactly what Pat did. Even though he and Ryan Wirtz were making plans for the next weekend.
Right.
Pat had already ordered the charcoal. Pat was saying, sure, let's do this or that.
Yeah.
Because they got together on the weekends and they did really great things and all over Berlin. Went to clubs, went to the Jewish Museum. Great stuff. AIDS lectures. Pat emailed his boss that he was going to be on work on Monday morning. He would be there. He had already ordered the charcoal.
Wow.
So she said, if it's any small consolation to you, just know that by the time he started the process, he was maybe in no pain. That he was determined and that everything else was out of his mind. He was mechanically going through, plugging up every hole in the bathroom, the drains in the shower, the drains in the sink, the cracks in the walls, everything. The towel under the door. It takes a lot of planning. And she said it differs from people who might use a gun. People who use a gun, she explained to me, maybe a little bit more impulsive. They have a chance to change their mind. Pat, he wasn't going to change his mind.
Yeah. And he was a scientist, an engineer.
And he knew exactly how to do it. I said, how did you learn? He said he went to the student union before he got hospitalized at Stanford. He went to the student union. I know, I'm so sorry to be taking this lightly, but it's the way he said it to me. He said, I looked up how to do it on a computer at the student union. Because I said, suicide? How did you even? He said, I looked it up. I looked it up online. And so after he died, I tried looking it up. And all I got was sites on to not do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not get past them. I mean, you got to be on the computer a long time or know it a lot better than I do to really get the actual plans to do this.
Yeah, right.
So he was determined, Andrew. That's all I can say. I mean, I've talked to other young men who have tried it, and one thing they tried to make me feel better about is that when they were going through the process, they were not thinking about their mother. And I don't know why that made me feel better, but because I thought, wow, you didn't know you had a total, I mean, I just can't believe that people who loved him did not enter in, but they don't. They just don't. Because that's what people who have tried it and failed say.
Yeah, like that, having to block out those people in your heart to go through with it. And it's interesting because I think the last time I talked to him probably was like fall of 2005, but it wasn't much words, we hadn't talked that much, you know what I mean? And that was online. And it's like we talked less and less, and it's like you go back and say, oh, I should have found, what if I'd found the right words, or what could I have said? And I don't think that helps. And I think a lot of like the healing is accepting. And that sucks. That's hard.
I mean, of course I blame myself every day. And then I flip-flop and I look at it, I try to look at it from what I saw at that time. And this is, again, what therapy is all about, to try to get you to see what you were feeling in the context of the conversations that you were having, not from in the hindsight of here's what the consequence was. You tend to judge. I try not to judge myself too harshly because of what I remember from the context. But in the case of suicide, that's all wiped out. You judge yourself by the consequence, plain and simple. That's it. That's the only gauge you can use.
Yeah.
So that's what we're all doing.
Yeah. Because it's, right, the consequence is such a binary thing. He's not here. And
yeah.
But we can keep his memory alive. And that's like an antidote to that, I guess.
Yeah.
And talk about this and being able to express the feelings and signs of depression, and knowing, if you know that it's something in your mind or in someone's mind, that helps us understand it. That having medical professionals or, but that, I guess that only can do so much too. You can't force someone to go see a doctor or have them fly home. You can't. Pat was a grown up, and he was going to make his own decisions anyway.
Yeah.
And I guess that's maybe some of the heartbreak of being a parent, right? Like having to let him fly.
Yeah.
And that's a way of showing you.
Yeah, not knowing, really, at what point do you intervene? And I really fudged that point completely.
But if he'd asked you for help, like, Mom, I need help. Please come to Berlin. I need you. You would have been there in a second.
Yeah.
He wasn't asking for that. Was he? Yeah.
He was very astute at reading cues, and I'm not sure whether he read something. My little cheerleading from the side. You can do it, Pat. You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if he was reading. Okay, she's going to let me handle this. And, I should have known it was just too big for him. but I wasn't getting it. I wasn't getting how he could be so disappointed that this young man who he met in a club in Berlin, a DJ, would reject him. I just could not understand how that got him to wanting to die. And again, I think it goes back to Peter Kramer and Against Suicide, that depressed people do not recover from disappointment. And by the way, the more depressive episodes they go through, the more vulnerable they are because of the biology of the brain, which he explains in a very literary way, a lot of research. But I think that book came out in 2005, 2006, and
Oh, wow.
it's maybe outdated now.
Yeah.
But at the time, I needed to see depression, and he showed it to me.
That's really good that you found that book.
Yeah.
And it helped you. And this book you've written hopefully will inspire and show another side to people. So let's talk about the process of writing the book. You said you've been working on it for a while.
Yeah. There were just so many really magical moments from the first trip we made to Berlin. The Stanford Center had a memorial for Pat. We came home from Berlin with so many wonderful Pat stories. I mean, all good. There was so much good. He had such a great time.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Wirtz was really my inside source on what Pat was doing. He spent a lot of time with me. The funny things they did together, they would. Ryan worked at the American Embassy in Berlin, and Pat would meet Ryan for lunch. And on the outside of the embassy is the German police, and then on the inside of the embassy are the U.S. Marines. And Pat would have to show his passport in order to get in and go up to Ryan's office. And he would joke to Ryan that he was thinking of slipping his phone number into his passport to one of these handsome Marines. Oh, God.
No, it could have been interesting.
He was just hilarious like that.
Yeah.
And then he and Ryan would go to lunch at the Reichstag, because they said the Reichstag had great cheap food. And I guess in those days you could just, march right up to the top to the restaurant, which I went to see. Now you have to make reservations at the Reichstag, even to get into the Reichstag.
Yeah.
But anyway, there were just a lot of really magical moments. And it's like, it's the community that gets you through.
Yeah.
And I just had to record that. Like,
so the book is the story of the communities you've connected with that have helped you heal.
Yeah.
And,
right.
and the stories of his friends and everything.
Yeah.
And how is how was it therapeutic and helpful for you as a mom writing?
It's a lifesaver.
Yeah.
The community was huge.
Yeah.
The writing is tortuous. It's like you were asking, how did you feel when you first heard the news? Yeah, it's just like having your heart ripped out. And this is, brings that back in a second, in a flash. It'll all just come back. Why, But in trying to find out why, I think I learned a little bit about why, and that was helpful. When people say depression is a disease, I see it visually now. I see a little bit of brain breakdown in my mind. I don't just see a completely irrational act anymore.
Right.
And so I guess I wanted people to come away with something, I mean, it's one thing to just talk about who this person was, but honestly, I felt like I didn't know him anymore.
Yeah.
I thought, I can't write about him. I don't even know who he was anymore. And yet there was a path that I took that I thought Maybe we can all react a little better than I did from now on. Maybe we can actually lead someone by the hand to the doctor or the hospital, or when Pat died, and then there was the Virginia Tech massacre. It was a young man named Cho, who I think shot the 32 people and then himself. And I think President Hennessy, the president of Stanford, then wrote this kind of an open letter in the Stanford Daily about what can we do? What can we do? Well, I decided I would give it a stab. I would try to tell them. And my point being that you have to go to them. Somebody who is that low is shutting themselves off. I mean, erasing themselves. In Pat's case, digitally, in every way.
Right.
You have to go to them. And in my case, that meant I should have gone to Berlin sooner. He might have killed himself afterward, but I would have felt a lot better about myself afterward. President Hennessy was wondering what he could do, and I said, you got to go to them. And yet, somebody wrote back through the Daily, online, I guess, and said, what are you? You're expecting us to be a nanny state, You're expecting nannyism. And, fair criticism. At the same time, you asked the question. I'm going to tell you one answer. You might not like it, and it might not be practical at all, but...
I remember seeing your letter and that person's response. I thought that was very unkind. And
you remember that?
I saw that. I remember because it was, I don't know why I saw it, but I remember seeing your letter and thinking, here's a parent who's lost someone. You're giving practical advice. That's very unsympathetic. It's not helpful to make someone feel bad for that.
Yeah, I mean...
That must have hurt your feelings.
Yeah, I thought, wow, that was cold.
Wonder who that was. Probably not a student. I don't
remember who that was.
That's cold. And that's a practical solution. That's one way. If someone is suffering, to really try to monitor them. Yeah. And that's...
Yeah, and yet Pat was in a loving environment. I mean, this is not to say that there were not people there who would help him. There were people there who would help him. He had a boss at Siemens where he worked, who was just amazed by Pat. I mean, they worked on Pat tried to explain it to me, to his technically illiterate mom. They worked on a graphics simulator at Siemens. And the boss thought it would take 2 weeks. Pat did it in 3 days.
Wow.
He probably pushed himself too hard. That probably didn't help his mental state. But at the same time, they were close. They worked well together. Pat loved coming with ideas and mathematical solutions. And I read some of his programming professors at Stanford wrote recommendations for him. I mean, he was well loved. He brought people into his life. He was social. He had boyfriends.
Yeah. And he knew he was loved.
Yeah, and he knew he was loved.
That's something that it's given me peace, knowing that he knew that. Yeah. I really appreciated him as a friend. And I just wish he'd thought about how much we would have missed him.
Yeah.
Making that link, but I know it's like honoring him with the song was nice. And this podcast is a way to talk about how we've tried to heal from the pain, but you always feel like there's something more you can do and you don't quite know what it is.
Yeah.
Except to be appreciative every day and love the people we love. And I don't know.
Yeah. It's
write
like,
about it.
Yeah, write about it. I mean, how are you going to, it's like Libby feels this so acutely. They're 2 minutes apart in age, and they were close. And so her thought is, what do I do? do I do something for Pat? Do I do something for me? What do I do? And what she's ended up doing is getting a master's in psychology and working on getting her license and working in an emergency center that handles acute psychosis. So people who are very, very ill, mentally ill, come into this emergency crisis intake, and Libby is the first person they see.
Wow.
So that's how she's doing it. And it's, I mean, my gosh, when I just think of how I skim on the surface of life, you know, she's right there in the trenches every single day. It's just so exceptional.
It's amazing. So she's made it, she's kept his memory alive by helping people who are suffering.
Yeah.
And to have a twin, to lose a twin, like, and to come out of that so strong and helping others, like, what a beautiful daughter.
It's just wonderful. It just gives you faith. It really does.
Yeah,
so, and
beautiful.
the aftermath has been all about that.
And now you have a granddaughter, right?
Yeah.
From Pat's older brother.
Right. And Pat's older brother has this just amazing family. They're just strong, been through their own hardships.
Yeah.
And Addie is just, they're just such great parents to her. And she's adorable. So, yeah, it gives you heart. It really does.
I remember I met Colin in Seattle when he lived there, and just really liked him a lot. And it's been cool getting to meet your family.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an upside. Like, I maybe would have never met any of you guys, and being able to, it's sad to try to put the pieces together, but I feel like we'll all always be friends, hopefully. And
yeah, I do too.
And I'm really excited to read the whole book. And maybe excited isn't the right term, but I'm looking forward to like learning about your journey.
Well, yeah. Thank you, Andrew. It took me to some very strange places, but all good.
Yeah,
all good. And we're just going to continue. And I mean, the fact that you're celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the album, which and the song 23 is to me amazing that you've been able to combine this music with something so sad and kind of dark. I remember seeing you perform it in San Francisco, thinking, okay, how is he going to get this, bopping crowd to want to listen to something with a lot different temperature? And bam, they did it on a dime. And this is to me the lesson that I love of having gone through this, that I have learned over and over, whether it was talking to 7th and 8th graders in my school who are just realizing, they're going through adolescence and they're realizing that they're this or that or having certain feelings, whatever they are, that they would, actually want to talk about that, to having great conversations with Pat about everything he was feeling, to then going to the Gay Pride Parade in Berlin in 2009. And I mean, I was the oldest person there, easily. And I mean, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
It was absolutely, these kids, they're not kids, really. I mean, I shouldn't even refer to them that way, but I carried a picture of Patrick at Siemens, and I put his dates, and they would come up to me and give me hugs in the middle of the parade.
Yeah.
Because they knew right away what was going on. Because when you open up some of the gay club magazines in Berlin, there's a whole page of people who have passed away. So they are familiar with the problem. And of course, it's Berlin.
Yeah.
I mean, 70% of that city was destroyed in World War II.
Oh, right.
So
Talk about coming back from a tragedy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. They've seen it.
They've seen it. And Berlin's really it's a progressive place. It's really like,
It's just completely swung.
Yeah.
It's completely swung.
that must have felt good to get those hugs from those people.
I felt more at home there than anyone had a right to be. It was, I mean, Pat's friends have just held my hand every step of the way.
Yeah.
And that's because of him.
Yeah.
It's because of him.
Well, I see a lot of Pat's heart in you and his smile, and like, that's why it's like, it's people, we're all dealing with it too, even now, 13 years later.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, you think nobody's going to feel it like you do, but I forget really that he had really good friends, and that they didn't understand it either. You know?
No. And you know, I wanted to end telling you a dream I had. Like, it's probably like maybe like 5 years ago. I dreamed that we were somewhere on campus and he was there, and it was not weird that he was still alive. And I was like, "Didn't you die?" He's like, "No, I'm still here." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." And I'm like, and he said, "But this is the last time you're going to see me." And I said, "Oh." And he's like, "I want you to know something." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I want you to remember to keep laughing. That's all I want you to remember."
Wow.
And I remember I hugged him, and I remember just waking up, just sobbing. And it was like, I don't know if it was like something like he came to me from another world, or that was really him. But that moment was the time I really could let go. And I've tried to keep the joy alive, you know, keep this good spirit alive. And yeah, I maybe that really was his spirit, you know? So I just wanted to share that story.
Yeah, I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
I have to say that the fact that other people feel that way.
Yeah, you need Kleenex.
Yeah, you too.
Yeah, thanks. Here, we both need one.
Really helps. The fact that other people share the pain
Yeah.
really, really helps. And I think it's. I mean, I'm a perfect example of that. That you know, you get through based on what other people show you. And I remember reading about that a little bit in a book called Why Bad Things Happen to Good People.
I've heard of that book.
And it was about a rabbi named Harold Kushner, whose 14-year-old son died of premature aging, I think it's called.
Oh, progeria?
Yeah, progeria.
Yeah.
I think you're right. So at age 14, this young man looked like 70. And so he explored this question in the book, which I think helped me understand how he came through it. And his best solution was community. That's what did it. His synagogue was just phenomenal. They just never stopped coming, seeing him, helping him, talking to him, bringing food. And I don't think he ever did figure out the God part, but it was the community that definitely worked. And for me, the God part wasn't really working in the traditional sense of faith, but the way it did work is that the Bible is very good at grief. The Bible is very good at dealing with adversity. And I really enjoyed the stories, and I took heart from them. A lot of literature is about death, as you know, and
Yeah.
and the guilt that people feel afterward. And so certainly Mary's reaction after Jesus is crucified is just, I mean, it just doesn't get any more powerful. So the only reason I know that is not because I went to church that much. I did not, but I had to teach the Bible when I was in my middle school, and we had to look at one of the books of the New Testament. So I began to realize, you want to look at grief? That's a great place to start.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And maybe God is the people coming together.
Yeah.
God is the way we show, I see your suffering, I care for you.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
You know, I remember when we went to see his graveyard, his grave, and they hadn't put the tombstone yet, and you were showing me his plot where he was buried, and I said to you, something my grandma said before she died, that she'd be in heaven waiting. And I said, you know, Pat will be waiting for us there. And you said, I hope so. And we both looked at each other like, you know, maybe that's true, but to speculate on it, sometimes that's enough, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I like to think I see him in a dream, I see him again, and we'll all be reunited. And hope is really powerful.
Yeah, it is powerful.
And those stories are powerful. And yeah, that's a great metaphor, like Mary finding out that her son had been, you know.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's what Christianity is all about. It's all about the death of someone who they would not let die. And so they didn't.
Right, and keeping its memory alive. And it's a similar thing. You love someone, you keep their memory alive.
Yeah.
And also the Bible is about, how you get back on your feet after this thing happens. Mm-hmm. And I think we've all been trying to do that. And when your book comes out, rest assured, I will definitely be letting everyone know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of you for staying strong and being a good grandma and being a good friend to Pat's friends and having time and making me lunch. And this has been sad, but like I really will remember this day forever.
Oh, it's very kind of you to come this far out of your way. And I mean, you're going on tour on Friday. My gosh. I mean, Andrew, you must be out of your mind with things to do. And we're looking forward to seeing you in Boston. That's just wonderful news.
VIP tickets.
All right. That's great news.
Yeah, so we're doing a show in Boston. And so maybe some of you can meet Pat's mom. That's
okay.
awesome.
All right. I'll be there.
Do you have there's a blog, right, where you post stuff?
Well, there used to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike Love set it up for me, actually. And,
Shout out to Mike Love.
Yeah, it's very big. Mike must have felt like, who is this person emailing me about setting up a blog? But set it up he did. And I admit I'm not great at keeping it up, nor am I great at keeping up my own website. However, because I've, really sort of been all consumed with making sure that when the book comes out, it's as good as I can make it. And it's been through editors. I mean, many people have held my hand.
That's good.
Believe me, many people. I mean, I listened to your, with great envy, I listened to your podcast last night with Eamon Dolan.
Oh, Eamon.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I mean, what a savvy, smart, sharp young man. I just thought, that's who I need. I need somebody like him. Because who wants to do this? Who wants to write a book about their son that died? You know, I mean, nobody. This is the last thing I wanted to be doing.
I know, right?
And yet, I'm not going to let him die. It's terrible to say, but I'm just not going to let it happen. So in order to keep him alive, I have to make it way better than is my natural instinct. And that means getting every ounce of help from everybody in it, from everybody I know, from every person I can beg. I don't care who it is. It has to be good by other people's standards, not just mine.
So it's been collaborative in a way.
It has been a huge collaborative, yeah.
But I'm sure it's hard too, like to edit it. You want to put all of his life in there. So like we were talking upstairs when we were looking at his room, like I told you like how songwriting is a lot of subtraction.
Yeah.
And so it must be painful. Like even removing a sentence is like, you have to think hard about it, right? Or is it
you do.
Yeah.
I mean, as an English teacher, I did have to learn a little bit about writing. And my best tool is to let it cool off and also to read it out loud, which sounds extremely cumbersome for an entire book. However, it really is the best standard that if you can make sense out of it while you're reading it out loud, then you're halfway there, at least halfway there. So I did. I read the whole thing out loud. I think I did that a year ago. I trotted it around to some agents. I wrote some query letters. Oh my gosh, it's exhausting though.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? No, I've just gotten too far. So I bought InDesign. I laid it out. Learned what I needed to learn to get it to look halfway decent. I thought, darn it, this is me, because I read somewhere that even if you get accepted by an agent, it's 2 years. It's 2 years before the book is actually published, I thought.
Yeah.
And then who has control of it?
Right.
Then who's running the show?
Right.
You know?
Right.
I mean, I want choice over the advice that I accept or not.
That's
You know
great.
what I mean? And so
you're
anyway.
you do it DIY publishing?
I'm going it alone.
That's great.
If anybody wants to jump in, or I get nervous and I, need some help, I'll certainly dial some people up. But
Well, so if anyone in the publishing world or editors are listening, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
well, that's a great question.
Maybe they can email me and I'll link them with you.
Well, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
But I do have a website that Libby made for me, and it's pretty simple. It's just lisetterimer.com, and you can email me through that website. And there's information about the book on that website. It's lisetterimer.com.
Okay, cool. And they'll see that from the title of the episode. Your name will be the title.
Okay.
That's cool. Do you think you'd ever do like an audiobook for Audible? Because I know people love Audible.
I thought about it.
Yeah.
And it's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I am very tempted, but there's some German in there
that
I really have to brush up on. Maybe I'll get Mike.
Yeah. And you could probably, Mike is good. There's a site called Fiverr where you can hire people to like read things in different languages.
Interesting.
So I can tell you about that. Like you could send in the text and they send you the file and you could drop that in.
Oh, okay. I didn't know about that.
Because I heard now with Audible you can kind of submit yourself.
Oh, you can?
You don't need a publisher. But I think Audible's, people need to hear the story. So
yeah,
that's cool.
And that's a good gauge for me. Is it reading well? Does it read well? And that's another reason why the Bible is so good. The King James Version. It was written to be read out loud in church because of course most people couldn't read.
There you go.
And so it's a great way to set a standard for your writing.
Yeah. And people nowadays, it's like the podcast medium and audiobooks. It's a way we're talking about community. People feel less alone.
Exactly.
When you hear that human voice. But
yeah, you have a great community, Andrew.
Oh, thanks.
I have
I'm
learned
lucky.
so much. I'm not kidding you. When my father and his wife went to hear you when you were playing something at Stanford, they thought it was great and all, and they loved you and they loved Pat. But when Pat died, I stopped listening, reading, unless it had something to do with suicide. Or Pat had told me that it was great music or something like that. I was shutting everything out. But this, you coming out here to Northeast Connecticut, which, there's really not much else out here, I realized I had to sort of MC Lars binge or something. I'm not sure what you call it, but I started listening to your podcasts, and I thought, oh well, who are these people? They're
so
like
many episodes,
half my age or something. And all of a sudden, I just could not believe how professional they were, how incredibly capable they were.
Yeah.
I think I started with Sean Donnelly.
Okay.
That young man taught me so much. I'm not kidding you. The difference between input and output, how I was at a stage of my life where after Pat died, no more input.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Done. Nothing. I don't care about any of that stuff. No fiction books, none of that.
Yeah.
Still that way. It's the output now. And I think he used the example of, I don't know, going to a meeting or something in Santa Monica about something he was working on and thinking to himself, you know, this is really not as important as what I'm actually working on, what I'm actually creating. And his gauge was, if you know, when you're thinking about this, to use 90% work, 10% marketing or meeting or, you know, doing what other people want you to do. And he was curious how you kept that balance, which I thought, you know, your answer was really good. You just kind of go with the flow.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that I'm glad you listened to that episode, because Sean is an example of someone who's done things independently, you know, and he was fortunate to have that show, and he's an inspiring guy to me too, you know.
He sounds like he would be. He really does. But honestly, then I went on. Okay, then there's MC Hawking. Oh, well, who's this person? You know, MC Hawking. I don't even know what MC stands for. And it was a fabulous story about meeting Stephen Hawking or performing for him, and then you were involved in that. And that was exciting. And then I came to the end, to the Dark Hole song at the end.
Yeah.
I want to tell you, Andrew, that was drop dead unbelievable.
Oh, thanks.
I had not input anything for years.
Yeah.
I don't listen to music anymore because it just makes me sad.
Yeah.
It's Pat. And that song cut through. I mean, it was so full. It was so grand. It was such a full sound. He is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
And you know, Ken, MC Hawking, like, he's had his own struggles with depression, and music for him has been such an outlet, you know, and I think connecting that with the astrophysics of the black hole, it does really a cool concept.
Oh, it worked beautifully. And of course, you know, you're all speaking so quickly, I can't understand a word you're saying because I'm old and halfway deaf. However, I didn't have to.
Right.
Because the music was so beautiful.
Yeah.
The violins, it was like, whoa.
Yeah, I was grateful to be on that song.
I bet you were.
Pretty cool.
I bet you were.
You know, and now, Lisette, you're on this list of cool people I know.
Yeah, right.
Strong people. And that's why I like doing this podcast, because it becomes this like digital canon of interesting people I know who are, the theme is people who have survived in a changing industry or through adversity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
And friends, and usually it's a Venn diagram of those things, and you're someone who's, I see you've gotten stronger, and yeah, you know, you really honor your son.
Yeah. What are you doing? I'm living.
Yeah.
I'm trying. That's all.
I'm here. We're both here.
Right.
And yeah, well, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. It's just been, I hope I didn't blab too much. It's been a great outlet for me.
I hope that it was okay talking about this stuff.
Oh, it's wonderful. I never get the chance. I mean, that's one thing about writing. One thing about the book is that normally when you talk with people, it's on the fly, and you can't really carry on a conversation like this. You know, you even with your therapist, you know, you're starting to go, yeah, you're on the clock, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're starting to go in one direction, and then, you know, they want you to see it somehow. And so the direction changes. But in a book, you don't have to be interrupted. You know, it's a conversation that you can have. Nobody can cut in.
And that's a little bit what Eamon was talking about reading it. It's
exactly.
an uninterrupted experience.
Exactly. That you're not, that ebooks have, you know, carved out a little niche for themselves.
Yeah.
However, the printed book has not gone away, and maybe that's one of the reasons, is that it's just you in the book. It's not all of these little things that you can click on and distract yourself and fool yourself into thinking that you're getting the full value.
Right.
You're not.
Right. And that's why I like this medium, because it allows me to talk to people and be uninterrupted, and we're not looking at our phones, or, we're not distracted. And I thought maybe it'd be cool if we could end with, I don't know if did you ever hear the 23 remix?
I'm not sure if I've heard the remix.
I'll send you the MP3 of it, but it's about, I met a girl in London who lost her boyfriend, and she talks about how 23 had helped her, and and then I have a friend who does a guest verse about, it's about healing. And so I'll send it to you, but I thought it might tie in with this.
It sounds perfect.
Our themes.
Yeah, it sounds perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been wonderful. We love you a lot.
Huge love.
Too. Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Check. We've all lost somebody before, had somebody selfishly take themselves off of this planet. Just want to say I love you, Corey, man. I miss you. I know these kids, and they love to get high, probably to try to escape the same things that I have battled with, and now stained onto our psyche. At one point or another, we're all convinced that we might be just a tad bit broken, and only hear the bad even when good things are spoken. We find solace in fine patterns and bottles, and a lot of us become the demons that we can't abolish. So we apply the polish, put up a front that says we're okay, but in reality we're demolished. See, there's a lot of different ways to kill yourself, while some of them are blatant, others are hidden well. And when your family can't tell, and it's you against the world, but your whole world's a living hell. And if you're anything like me, you gotta know you're not alone, and we've all been 23.
I wrote this song 4 years ago. A lot of healing has taken place since then. A girl in London told me that her boyfriend took his life. He was 23, I said it hurts, but it's alright. I told her not to worry, he'd be up in heaven waiting. I don't have the answers, but listen, this is all I'm saying. I seen the demons too, they wanna take me down. I felt the darkness closing in like no one is around. I battled with this feeling even though I keep it quiet. I miss my homie Pat, and I can't deny it. I wrestle with the guilt like maybe it was all my fault. And so I write these songs because it's all I got. It's sitting on a rocky mics with science every night, making music, touring Europe, keeping his memory alive. We raised a grand for the AFSP. Pat, I see you, homie, and I hope you're proud of me. You said that rap was magic every time I did my vocal takes. Funny how the heart can heal even when you feel it break.
Gentlemen, I want you to be a good friend of mine. This is Patrick Wood.
What's up, Lars?
What's up, Pat?
How you doing, man?
Good. What do you think of me having my recording equipment take up 3/4 of our small room in the Kimball dorm?
It's no problem, man. I love you.
I love you too, Pat.
Thanks, Lars.
Pat Wood, hey, that's you.
Okay. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Lisette, for your time. And yeah, what an episode. Next week, we got Greg Carlisle, who I was in Kentucky a few weeks ago, and I drove to Morehead State University, where he's a theater professor. And we talked about his book, Elegant Complexity, a study of David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. And as I've wrapped up my Infinite Jest series on Patreon, it's a cool way to kind of wrap up that chapter. So be sure to check that out next week. Be sure to come see us, nerdcoretour.com, for dates. And I hope everyone's feeling good. And, like I said on tour when I performed the song, if there's someone you haven't talked to in a while who you love, give them a call today or shoot them a text. Like, hey, I'm thinking of you, Just want to let you know you're on my mind, because that's why we're all here, right? To be here for each other and let each other know we love each other. And so I want to let you know I love and appreciate y'all for supporting the podcast and my music and my, the memory of my friend. And yeah, I hope y'all have a good week. See you next week. Thank you for listening. Bye. Oh, and thanks to Lisette for her bravery. Bye, guys.